When people think of Archie Comics, they tend to remember the adventures of a group of regular teenagers, led by Archie, Betty, Veronica, and Jughead. However, one character introduced in the comics has managed to create a life of her own. Originally created in 1962 by George Glader and Dan DeCarlo, Sabrina the Teenage Witch has been depicted in many incarnations, and each one different from the last. After digging into her lore, I was surprised to learn that many of the characters' personality traits, family, and backstory we've grown accustomed to originated in the television sitcom rather than the original comics. Sabrina was originally written as an anti-hero who would continually attempt to ruin the days of the citizens of Riverdale. Pretty much anything wrong that happened to Archie and the rest of the gang was caused by Sabrina's magic. However, there were times when her spells would backfire and improve their days, much to the chagrin of her head witch. Her closest companion was her familiar, an orange house cat named Salem, who occasionally had Garfield-style thought bubbles but never directly communicated with Sabrina. Glader and DeCarlo did not intend for Sabrina to be a recurring character, but she was so popular with readers she became a regular part of the Archie group. A popular misconception is that Sabrina was inspired by the success of the popular television series Bewitched, but she was created 2 years before Samantha hit the airwaves. As Sabrina became more ingrained in the community of Riverdale, she began ditching her original intention of vexing the citizens and instead became one of the gang. Stories would often revolve around her trying to go on a date with a boy she fancied, often competing with her nemesis Rosalind for his affection. Eventually, she did find a steady boyfriend with Harvey, who, like the other mortals in town, was unaware of her magical abilities. Sabrina's change in personality did annoy the head witch Della, as well as her Aunt Hilda, who would reprimand her for not using her magic for evil deeds anymore. However, Sabrina did get support from her Aunt Zelda and cousin Ambrose, who recognized her need to fit in with other teenagers. Following the popularity of Filmation's The Archie Show, the studio acquired the rights to give Sabrina her own animated series. The cartoon was largely faithful to the comics, replicating the designs and then hip 60s style. Like the comics, the show also involves Sabrina getting into all sorts of mischief with Harvey and her Riverdale pals, as the spells frequently go awry, and she also tries to stop Aunt Hilda's shenanigans. The show proved a hit in its first season, to the point CBS capitalized on this by having Filmation's Groovy Ghoulies cross over for the second season. Eventually, The Archie Show and Sabrina the Teenage Witch were combined to form the new Archie and Sabrina Hour, although this only lasted 13 episodes and Filmation's deal with Archie Comics ended not long afterwards. Over the following 2 decades, Sabrina remained on the comic book pages, continuing to cast her spells, cause mayhem, and date Harvey. However, in 1996, fresh off the success of Clarissa Explains It All, Melissa Joan Hart was cast as Sabrina in a TV movie that aired on the Showtime network. The movie gave her a new origin story, where she only finds out she's a witch on her 16th birthday, and then, for most of it, she attempts to make a young Ryan Reynolds fall in love with her. It also made Salem into a black cat who could speak to Sabrina. As good as Hart is, the rest of this film underwhelms. It's such an obvious product of the 90s, and the script feels like the screenwriters desperately pandering to teenage girls. We even get a clothes shopping montage. The magic is also disappointing, as Sabrina doesn't do many interesting things with her powers, and when she finds out she can't use magic to make someone love her, she whines and moans. Salem and the Ants also come across as boring, and as a whole, Hart's initial appearance does not hold up. A few months later, the sitcom Sabrina the Teenage Witch premiered on ABC, which replaced most of the cast and brought in other writers. The pilot also retcons the TV movie by changing Sabrina's origin yet again, although having also seen Sabrina Goes to Rome, it seems the movies exist in a different continuity. In the show, it's revealed that Sabrina is half witch, half mortal, while Salem, being a cat, is punishment for trying to take over the world. Hilda and Zelda's personalities also switch from the comics, with Hilda being the more easygoing witch and Zelda becoming the stricter aunt. Sabrina was also given the last name Spellman, as well as a new nemesis in the form of head cheerleader Libby. The pilot also had Sabrina meet Harvey for the first time, and it did not take long into the first season for the two to become a couple. One of the nice things about their relationship was the mutual respect they had for each other, thus making their relationship easy to buy into. During the later seasons, network executives tried to have Sabrina see other men, but it was obvious Harvey would remain her true love. Throughout the series, Sabrina also had a revolving door of best friends. First there was Jenny, but the writers seemed unsure of what to do with her most of the time. Valerie lasted for 2 seasons, and her nervous personality made her a good pairing with Sabrina. For the college years, we got Roxy and Morgan, who were decent, although I did find it a tad frustrating they never found out Sabrina was a witch. The writers on Sabrina, including story editor Frank Conniff, crafted plenty of funny episodes that properly dealt with Sabrina balancing her magical abilities with trying to live in normal society. Several episodes would have her try to take the easy way out of her magic, see things not work out in her favor, and then ultimately learn her lesson. This could have gotten tired and formulaic, but the writers managed to find enough fresh angles. Sabrina's personality on the show helped too, as Hart was given plenty of clever and witty one-liners, and the show was not afraid of showing her flaws. Conniff and the writers also injected the series with plenty of craziness, especially when it would venture into the other realm. Salem was another one of the highlights, as we see him hilariously grow accustomed to being a cat, although his desire for world domination never went away. Nick Bakay not only voiced Salem, he also served as a writer, and thus was able to give himself the best lines. For its 4 seasons on ABC, Sabrina became one of the network's highest-rated series, and helped re-energize the TGIF block for a while. The popularity of the show was so big, the sitcom's characterizations and histories eventually became canon in the comics. ABC also tried copying the success of Sabrina by greenlighting a sitcom called You Wish about a genie, and another called Teen Angel about teen angel. For one night, Sabrina even crossed over into the other shows on TGIF when Salem swallowed a magic time ball. However, neither of these new sitcoms lasted more than a single season. While ABC was eager to order a 5th season of Sabrina the Teenage Witch, they felt Paramount Television, which produced the show, was ordering too high of an asking price. So the show changed networks to the WB for its final 3 seasons, albeit with most of the original writers, including Conniff, gone. The later years took a little while to get going as Sabrina moved into a college dorm and met new friends, but it eventually found its groove. The abrupt exit of Hilda and Zelda at the end of the 6th season was a little disappointing, but the show managed to end on a strong note, with Sabrina and Harvey driving off into the sunset. I recently watched the entire sitcom from beginning to end, and I'm happy to say it holds up as a charming and funny series mostly driven by Melissa Joan Hart's charm and peppiness. Around the time the sitcom was airing on ABC, Deke Entertainment acquired the animation rights and produced Sabrina the Animated Series. Airing on Disney's One Saturday Morning block, the show existed in a different continuity and focused on a pre-teenage Sabrina trying to understand her powers. Nonetheless, a few cast members from the sitcom contributed their voices, with Melissa Joan Hart voicing Hilda and Zelda, her younger sister Emily as Sabrina, and Nick Bakay again voicing Salem. The animated series also introduced a mortal guardian for Sabrina, her Uncle Quigley. I did watch this show in my youth, and it was your standard Saturday morning cartoon. Eek the Cat creator, Savage Steve Holland, served as the showrunner, and he brought the needed energy to it, and being an animated show, it was able to be a bit more outlandish than its live-action counterpart. For one thing, Salem was allowed to be more active, as opposed to the sitcom where he would frequently switch between being an animatronic and a real cat. 3 years after the animated series ended its run, Deke returned to the property with Sabrina's Secret Life. None of the original voice actors took part in this new show, which had Sabrina attending both high school and a secret magic school, although Maurice LaMarche made for a more than solid replacement for Salem. Both animated series continued the theme of Sabrina trying to use spells to her own benefit, only for them to backfire on her. 10 years later, a computer-animated series titled Sabrina, Secrets of a Teenage Witch debuted on the Hub Network, with animation provided by Splash Entertainment. With Ashley Tisdale voicing Sabrina this time, there was a heavier emphasis on the other realm and the various magical creatures that live there. The biggest character change came from Salem. In this incarnation, he's a spy working for the main villain, and Sabrina is unaware he can talk. I will admit the animation leaves a little bit to be desired, but I'm not sure what their budget was. The series only lasted 26 episodes though, and was quickly cancelled. Back in 2012, a big-screen Sabrina the Teenage Witch movie was announced at Sony Pictures. The movie would have gone into her origin story, and would have been another slightly different take on the character. A screenplay had supposedly been completed, but then nothing, most likely due to the regime change at the studio. Thankfully, a new take on Sabrina was already brewing at Archie Comics. In 2013, Chief Creative Officer Roberto Aguirre-Sacasa decided to take the iconic Archie characters in a wildly different direction with a comic book series titled Afterlife with Archie. In it, Jughead asks Sabrina to resurrect his dead dog, which ultimately leads to an infestation of zombies in Riverdale. This series became enormously popular, leading Aguirre-Sacasa to create another horror-themed comic book, this time with our favorite teenage witch as the star. Chilling Adventures of Sabrina takes her back to the 60s and shows her dealing with demonic spirits and dark forces. I read the first volume and I found it to be a creative take on Sabrina and her other signature characters. Chilling Adventures even introduces a new, more modern take on Cousin Ambrose and reveals that Betty and Veronica are also witches. The comic, meanwhile, presents a more sinister side to the union between her parents and the effect this has on Sabrina. The success of Chilling Adventures and the popularity of the Riverdale television series led to the announcement that the comic would be adapted for screen, with Netflix ultimately picking it up. With Aguirre-Sacasa acting as showrunner, the show maintained the dark imagery of the comic, but with some slight alterations. We see Sabrina, played by Kiernan Shipka, trying to balance her devotion to a witch's coven and hanging out with her mortal friends. Harvey is her boyfriend, as usual, but in the show, Rosalind is Sabrina's friend rather than her enemy, and a new character is introduced, Susie, who is gender fluid. Salem returns to being a non-talking feline familiar in this incarnation, but due to Shipka's allergy to cats, he's unfortunately in the background most of the time, rather than a pivotal part of the series. While the production design and costumes are made to look like the 1960s, the show actually takes place in the present, which I admit took me a few episodes to realize. As expected, the magic featured on Chilling Adventures is a lot more menacing and gruesome, since the witches and warlocks get their powers from the underworld. That's right, the Spellmans are Satanists in this version, although the series eventually becomes a commentary against organized religion in general, as Sabrina fights against the Coven's misogynistic traditions and laws. Chilling Adventures has a lot of fun with depicting the evilness of this coven and the insanity of it all. Sabrina herself is able to be a flawed protagonist, not always making the right decisions, but certainly trying her best. The cast is excellent too, with Shipka making Sabrina her own, and Miranda Otto and Lucy Davis are particularly delightful and hilarious as Zelda and Hilda respectively. I've greatly enjoyed the 2 seasons released thus far, plus the Christmas special, and I look forward to what future dark avenues Chilling Adventures of Sabrina goes down next. And it's amazing to see how Sabrina the Teenage Witch has changed and evolved over the years. One of the reasons the characters continue to remain relevant is not just the wish fulfillment element, but also the different ways she has been depicted. There are many who have a fondness for the Melissa Joan Hart version, while others might gravitate towards Chilling Adventures. Maybe you're a traditionalist who prefers the original Archie Comics Sabrina. Let me know who your favorite Sabrina is, and I'll see you next time.